Okay, now it's 2 p.m. and let's start the webinar. So good afternoon, everyone. This is Shihan from New Venture Corporation. We are the organizer of the webinar today. Welcome aboard. So ever since the publication of the first round solar FIT in Vietnam, this country has become one of the hottest solar energy investment destinations in Southeast Asia. So during this webinar, speakers will give in-depth interpretation of Vietnam's solar forecast to 2030 and vision to 2045. So now I would like to give a brief introduction and a big welcome to our speakers for today. They are Mr. Wing Man Hien, the former director of the Institute of Energy and expert of Science Council of VER, Mr. Andrew Gilhooly, the head of TrinaPro APAC region from Trina Solar, Mr. Wing Antoine, the former deputy director of the Institute of Energy, member of Science Council of VEA and permanent member of Science Council of VER. Mr. Don Chi Liu, he's the founder and partner of DNA Vietnam LLC, and Ms. Clotilde Dinev, she is the sales director of Shire Oak International. So for today's webinar, we will first start with a 10-minute plenary speech given by Mr. Hien from VER, following by another 10 minutes plenary speech given by Mr. Andrew from Trina Solar. And then we will invite Mr. Don Chi Liu, Mr. Wing Antoine, Mr. Andrew, and Ms. Clotilde to join us for this panel discussion. And also, we will introduce the winner of the lottery session after the panel discussion. So everyone, please make sure to stay to the end to see if you have won the prize sponsored by Trina Solar. And the organizer of today's webinar, New Venture Corporation, we are dedicated to supporting key investors and developers for successful development and investment in Asia-Pacific renewable energy sector. Our footprints cover Asia-Pacific countries such as Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, China, Myanmar, Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, and some Middle East countries. So before starting the webinar, I would like to introduce all attendees with some housekeeping notes. If you experience any technical issues or have any questions for speakers, please use the below Q&A box. We will leave a Q&A time after the panel discussion. And also, we will share the webinar recordings with you by next week through your registration email. So now I'm happy to introduce Mr. Hien from VER. And let me hand the mic to him, and let's welcome him to begin the first session for today. Hello, Mr. Hien.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Nguyễn Mạnh Hiến.
No.
Presentation. My presentation is the main targets of national power development planning in Vietnam. In Vietnam, period of 2021 2030 with the vision to 2040-45 in short it is PDP 8. PDP is supply to enough for the energy demand to ensure the economy, the social, the economic development targets of a country with expected primary energy consumption in 2030 about 175 to 195 million square, about 350 million in 2045. And the total capacity of energy plant by 2030 will reach 125 to 130 gigawatt, with the total output of 50 and 600 billion kilowatt hour. The rate of the renewable energy project in the total capacity of power plant will reach 15 to 20% in 2030 and 25 to 30% in 2045. Total final energy consumption will reach 105 and 115 million square in energy intensity of 420 and 460 kilowatt per 1,000 US dollar GDP by 2030 and by 2045. 160 and 190 million with labor union 355 and 44 and 410 kilogram per 1,000 USD GDP by 2045. Developing a smart power grid so that Vietnam power grid system will stand in top for ASEAN by electricity supply reliability, and in the top the third ASEAN in by electricity access index, and ensure sufficient LNG import capacity of 8 billion cubic meters in 2030 and 15 billion cubic meters in 2045. The energy saving rate per total final energy consumption compared to the business as usual scenario bow is around 7% by 2030 and around 40% by 2045, reducing greenhouse gas emission in energy activity compared to bow is 15% by 2030 and 20% by 2045. For achieving this target, PDP has expected to develop the power plant in the country as below. Capacity of total of thermal power and solar power project in the planning period. We have 2025, 2030, 2045. Maximum capacity demand of the country. 38,700 megawatt, 86 now 500 153 153,000 installed capacity of a power plant, but the rate of thermal power plant is 30, 20, 29, 27, 20, and 18. So this is reduced by year by year reduced. Solar power project is 16,600 megawatt in 2022, 2020, and 18,600 in 2030, and 55 in 100 in 2045. The rate of solar power plant in per total capacity of power plant in Vietnam in 2020 is 24 13.5 13.6 in 2045. The number in above table so that the capacity of coal power fired thermal power plant reduced from 34 in 2020 to 27% in 2030, and 18% in 2045, while the capacity of solar power project reached 13.6% in 2030 and 20% in 2045. The current situation of solar power development in Vietnam. By the end of 2020 in Vietnam, there were put into operation power generation project with a total installed capacity of 69,300 megawatt, of which renewable energy capacity was 21 megawatt, 1,000 megawatt, including 3,600 megawatt small hydro, 300 megawatt biomass power, and more than 600 megawatt wind power, 1,600 solar power, including 7,008 megawatt, 900 megawatt ground and floating project, solar project, and 8,600 megawatt rooftop project account 30.6% of total capacity of the whole national system, in particular of solar power, ground and rooftop project reach 24%. The solar power project strongly developed in recent year in 2019 and 2020 due to the stimulating mechanism of government. The ground solar power project were strongly developed in a number of local cities in the southern central region as Ninh Thuận, Bình Thuận province and Highland province, where the solar radiation potential very high, but power demand still small, and that leaded to limit the power capacity release of release of solar power project due to power transmission grid constraint. Regarding the rooftop solar power project, the massive development of this project concentrated in southern region without controlling electricity demand, leading to difficult problem for operating the national power system. In particular, in this the first month of 2021, there happened a decline of solar power regulation that caused wasting social resources and unshort and urgent mentalistic for the investor. The attention in solar power development in Vietnam. On February 9, 2021, the Prime Minister issues the document number 185 requesting the Minister of Industry and Trade, the Provincial Power Committees and EVN Electricity of Vietnam to review issues related to solar power development in the country recent time. In this document, Prime Minister assigned the MYT as the procedure to coordinate with Provincial People Committee and EVN in. Firstly, reviewing the overall implementation of solar and rooftop solar power project, studying and immediately solving unexpected rising problem and not letting bad consequences happen. Secondly, examining and expecting the rooftop solar development promptly correcting and immediately handing mistake if any, especially the acts for seeking profit from the policy and deploying rooftop solar power project. Thirdly, in coming time, studying the proposal of the most effective management solution for renewable energy project without the weakness in the promulgated mechanism and policy, and taking measures to limit reducing capacity of renewable energy project currently in operation, minimizing the economic losses for the investor and what's of the social resource. Fourthly, MOIT to prepare and submit the auction mechanism for the solar power project to Prime Minister for approval. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hien, for your great information sharing. And now come to the next session. I would like to go ahead and hand the mic to Mr. Andrew from Trina Solar to give a plenary speech. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for that. I'll just share my screen momentarily. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to our friends at NeoVenture and for my fellow panelists for attending such a wonderful and well-attended event. Firstly, I hope everybody is remaining safe in Vietnam, you and your families. I'm based in Melbourne in Australia. We had a bit of a tough time last year being under a hard lockdown, and hopefully it won't come to that there. But yeah, I really hope everybody stays safe, and we're thinking of you all over in Asia. Yeah, really, it's my privilege and pleasure on behalf of Trina Solar to be here addressing this event as the plenary speech in such a dynamic and rapid growth market as Vietnam, where the capabilities of rapid build out of solar and other renewables to have a truly transformative effect on the economy. Yeah, we're super excited to be involved. Just by way of introduction, my name's Andrew Gilhooly. I manage Trina's tracker and utility sales in Asia Pacific. Based in Melbourne, Australia, but obviously managing the Australia market, India, Vietnam, Malaysia, and also the interesting emerging regions in Central Asia like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and so forth. I'll be describing to you today about Trina's tracker offering and how we think that can add superior value to our customers in the Vietnam market through a combination of reliable and high performance integrated PV and tracker, single axis tracker solutions. We basically help our customers achieve the highest and the most assured long-term energy outcome at a competitive capex, thereby unlocking the lowest cost of energy over the long term. So if you're not familiar with Trina, at our core, we are a module manufacturer, vertically integrated, public listed. By the end of this year, we will have, based on announced capacity expansions, the largest capacity in the industry of 50 gigawatts. A few years ago, we saw the PV marketplace becoming more crowded and commoditized. So we took the strategic decision to differentiate and offer complete system solutions. So we have an in-house development arm. We also have a distributed C&I rooftop EPC or development business. And really the tracker is the core of this solutions business within Trina. A couple of years ago, we acquired a Spanish tracker company called Enclave that were always number 4 or 5 globally. We increased our investment there to 100% at the end of last year. So they are now a wholly owned subsidiary and rebranded that as the Trina Tracker solution with the intention to get to number 3 in terms of global market share within the next couple of years. We also have smart energy offerings such as microgrid and energy storage and cloud-based monitoring solutions as well for SCADA. But we really lead the industry in terms of innovation. We were the first mover to large format 500 watt and more modules last year. We have N-type and TopCon and multi-layer offerings in development as well. So we're always trying to push the boundary in terms of technology for module and for complete solutions. You can see here our module range. We have 500, then we went to 550, 600, and more recently up to 670 watts for our Vertex series modules. They utilize the 210mm wafers, so high watts but low voltage, and that has some real benefits in terms of longer string lengths, especially when on a tracker solution. And we're really gearing up to a 50 gigawatt capacity for these modules by the end of this year. But just to focus on the trackers, so you can see an image of our Trina tracker here. And as I said at the outset here, it's really it really helps our customers through single axis tracking and bifacial. We see a value stacking effect there, where bifacial modules are used on trackers. We can unlock the highest and the most assured long-term energy outcome with lowest installed capex and lowest balance of system cost. Just to comment here on the considerations for using trackers in markets like Vietnam. So you can see the cyclone wind map here, and you see Vietnam incurring considerable wind speeds and high wind events. Typically, the limit on our trackers is up to 45 meters per second. We can go up to 50 meters per second, and indeed, Trina Tracker is one of the very few tracker companies to have successfully deployed trackers in cyclonic regions, including 120 megawatts in Northern Australia in 2018. There's also a perception that trackers have to be deployed on completely flat parcels of land. That's now no longer the case. And in fact, we have tracker options offerings available for sites actually up to 30% in terms of slope. So sites with incredibly variable terrain, we can now start to address with trackers. It's true that trackers do require more land for the same DC capacity as fixed tilt. Depending on the GCR, we need 2.5 to 4 acres per megawatt. However, if we spin that on its head, we can see trackers actually require less land for the same energy outcome. And that might be important as more solar parks get built out in Vietnam and land costs start to become more and more pertinent. And we've actually found for the same AC capacity as 150% DC to AC ratio fixed tilt, over the same area, trackers actually deliver more energy and a lower LCOE, and actually at a lower capex, because we can get the same or better energy with a lower DC to AC ratio with trackers. There is a higher O&M OPEX, but we have super low mean time between failure on our critical components with a very rigorous vendor qualification process. So with very well proven track record in the field. And even for equatorial regions like the southern part of Vietnam, there's a perception that tracking doesn't really stack up because the sun is directly overhead. But actually, we found in Vietnam and other equatorial regions, the sun still moves from east to west over the sky, right? So we're still picking up almost 100% of the direct beam irradiance at 99.6 by going with tracking and really reducing the reflectance losses that are incurred by fixed tilt solutions. When we use 2 portrait trackers, we can also unlock solar and agriculture. And with tracker producing more energy later in the day, there's a propensity for increased value adding through attaining a higher unit cost of energy when there's greater demand on the grid. We're also very excited about the propensity for self-consumption and behind the meter ground mount in Vietnam as well. But if we just focus on this slide here, this is pretty important in terms of considering the engineering challenges of integrating these ever increasingly large modules onto a tracker structure. So as I mentioned, Trina was the first mover to 500 watt large format modules last year. Then we went to 550, 600 and 670 as our competitors caught us up each time. But uniquely to Trina, we're also the only module manufacturer to offer a tracker solution. So we understand the engineering challenges and complexities of integrating these longer modules, and our 550s are actually 20% longer than the 500s onto a single axis tracker, which are inherently dynamic structures compared to fixed tilt. And so it's really important to consider the wind loading onto the tracker and ensure that it's fit for purpose from a structural perspective. So when the modules get longer, the trackers have to get higher off the ground to avoid the modules colliding with the ground, right? So obviously there's a non-linear relationship between mechanical wind load and height. You increase the height a little bit and the wind load increases a lot. So the other complexity here is with our low voltage modules, we can go up to 40 modules in a string. And obviously designing the tracker for these longer string lengths, the longer the structure, the lower the stiffness. And so we've had to go to multiple point driving to diminish this torsional strain that builds up and can give rise to second order dynamic effects. So we've invested very heavily in the wind tunnel verification with world leading wind consultancies like RWDI and CPP. And there's absolutely unequivocally no risk with our two types of trackers with these larger modules. So as I say, we have our 2 portrait Vanguard tracker, and we have our 1 portrait dual row agile tracker, which has 1 module in portrait. We think for the challenging sites, the 2 portrait is the way to go. It's got a really low foundation count and really good slope tolerance in any direction. For the less challenging sites, the 1 portrait dual row is probably the way to go. For flatter sites or sites that don't have geotechnical challenges, this one's actually a bit cheaper for us to install and can give rise to lowest installed capex. And I'll probably just conclude here. We did some value modeling on our tracker offering in Vietnam. We see in the southern part of Vietnam, there's a 18% pickup in kilowatt hour per kilowatt peak with the combination of bifacial and tracking compared to fixed tilt. And that gives rise to over a 7% reduction in LCOE. And over the same area, because we can deliver in absolute terms a 1% increase in energy, but at in this instance, a 501 megawatt DC capacity compared to 582 with fixed tilt, we actually unlock this lower cost of energy at an 8% lower capex overall as well in absolute terms. And maybe just to close, these are some of our reference projects here. So we've done 602 megawatts with State Power Investment Corporation in China on the Huanghe project. That's one of the largest single axis tracking projects on the planet. 103 megawatts on the Grasshopper project in the United States. And you can see the slope tolerance here, easily traversing these changes in slopes and being able to deploy on sites with very variable terrain. And then 120 megawatts in Australia in a cyclonic region in 2018 without any incident. And then actually towards the end of last year, a 6.4 megawatt behind the meter solar farm for self-consumption for the McCain Food Group. And will be, as a result of the success of that project, we'll be rolling out globally for many more of the McCain sites globally as well. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your interest. I'll hand over to the organizers, and I look forward to an interesting discussion with all of the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for the information sharing. And now it's time to start the panel discussion session for today, which is making decarbonization a reality with solar, Vietnam solar forecast to 2030 and vision to 2045. So let's now welcome Mr. Tuan, Mr. Liu, Ms. Clotilde, and Mr. Andrew to join us. Now I'm happy to handle the mic to Mr. Liu. He will be our moderator for this panel discussion today.
Thank you, Shihan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dang Chi Liu. I'm a partner of DNA Vietnam LLC, a local law firm based in Hanoi. We have been advising our clients to acquire and develop various renewable projects in the country. And it is my great pleasure again today to moderate a very interesting panel discussion session regarding the future policy for solar energy in Vietnam. So basically, we will talk about solar auction, DPPA, rooftop solar, and anything that can be possible in the future for solar energy. So to start with the start of the discussion, may I ask the panelists, Mr. Tuan, and then Clotilde, to make a quick introduction about yourself. So may I start with Mr. Tuan, please?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. let me introduce myself. I have more than 35 years work in the energy and electricity field. I work from 1984 in the Institute of Energy, and Dr. Hien is the former my chief, my boss. My field is mostly the strategy planning and the energy planning, energy balance, demand forecast, and our power system development. I participated in the power development plan in stage 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now I work for the Vietnam Energy Association, and also I'm the executive member of the Vietnam Energy Review. So thank and very happy to share with the past panelists, with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ton. We are very fortunate to have you with us today, given your 35-year experience working as a policymaker in the energy industry in Vietnam. Yes, and Clotilde, may you please do a quick introduction about you and Shire Oak Energy.
Hi, thank you very much for the organization of this webinar. It's my great pleasure, and I'm really honored to be here. It's nice to see that there are so many participants. I work for Shire Oak International. So Shire Oak International is a British company. We are a developer. We have projects all around the world, obviously a lot in the UK and in Europe. A few years ago, we decided to go outside of Europe and focus on emerging markets, and Vietnam is currently our main focus internationally. The idea is to have Vietnam as the headquarters of South Asia, because Vietnam is obviously a really hot market for solar right now, but so is South Asia. So we are developing, growing as we are getting projects. So we are basically working in commercial and industrial rooftop, and with the idea to keep working with our private off-takers, with big international companies, also in the future with the PPA. So basically, we want to help private companies have access to renewable electricity, and we are investing in projects, so developer investors, basically. And just for myself, I'm a sales director for Shire Oak, and I'm in charge of international companies. So I'm trying to find a best solution for them to decarbonize their operation. So only with solar rooftop for the moment, but we hope that we can push that a bit further and work with the PPA and give them 100% access to renewable electricity in the future. Thank you, Liu.
Yeah, thank you, Clotilde. Thank you for your introduction. Yeah, so I think Andrew already made an introduction about himself and Trina Solar in his previous presentation. So let's go straight to our discussion session. So as I mentioned, right now we will talk about the upcoming policy for solar energy. So basically, we all know is include the rooftop solar, a new feed for it, and we have a DPPA pilot program, and then we have the solar auction program, and all of that will be under the umbrella of the new Power Master Plan PDP 8. And I think the interesting situation in Vietnam now is that all the policies that I just mentioned are all in draft form. No policy has been officially released yet. So I think it's an opportunity for us to discuss and see how things will look like in the coming time. So I think my first question would be for Mr. Ton. I guess the first question that I guess many people in the audience want to know is the approval status of the PDP 8 as well as the new policy for auction and DPPA and rooftop. So when do you have any kind of insight information about the expected timeline for the government to release those documents?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Liu. Firstly, due to the in our office, the signal sometimes not so good, and I request and propose the organizer, you can share the. Would you like to share the presentation of Dr. Hiến to every people, audience, to know more about the topic of the presentation? Because that times the signal is not so good, and yeah, please. In terms of the PDP-8 process, you know that the MOIT, the Ministry of Industry and Trade, already submit the report to the government, to the Prime Minister, and the appraisal council already complete the process. But there is some consideration more, and then so now I think that's the hopefully within June or early of July, so government will approve the PDP. About the solar, I think that's due to the last 3 years from 2018 up to now. So the develop little bit overheat of the solar market in Vietnam. So sometimes somewhere is the over of the control in terms of the size and the capacity, and also the capability to transmit of the solar farm. And I think that's firstly that's the we face in the power system now facing a little bit difficulty in terms of the operation of the system. Due to one is the lower demand increase for this year, last year, also this year, and the surplus capacity for the system, as Dr. Hiến presents. So now we are around less than 40 gigawatt of peak demand, and total capacity about near 70 gigawatt. So I think we know that about some surplus the supply. The second thing is in the base scenario of PDP-8 was submitted. The room for the 10 years solar capacity development a little bit limits. According to the base scenario, just around the 2,000 megawatt from now to 2030 for 10 years. But I know that as far as I know that due to some concerning of the thermal power, so will be go behind of schedule. So I hope that and expected the government will approve the scale of the solar in the period from now to 2030, maybe raised to 4,000 or 5,000 megawatt. So I think that the solar market still have the room enough for development. And the main issue, I think that every stakeholder should pay attention and should concern about one is the rooftops. Will be have will be also continue the feed mechanism. However, that's the size is I hope that size is smaller, and the rooftop have to rate of the own use of the project owner. And however, I think that the feed quotation is enough of the guarantee the reasonable benefit for the investor. The second thing is we have to focusing on the technology, advanced technology, like Andrew present about some new feature of the technology in terms of the PV panel tracker. I think that's how we and to increase the productivity of the solar panel, like watt per square meter, and also the efficiency. That's the point is support to reduce the LCOE of the project. We also, I think that the government need to issue soon the auction mechanism to prevent the gap between the policy, because from the you know that for solar mechanism already stopped from the end of last year. I have my idea about the government should issue the level of the ceiling tariff in the area of the higher demand but lower radiation. I think that should make something like to release the pressure to the grid and transmission investment, and also expansion the area of the solar PV to develop. Next one is I think that's the investor should select the best technology and the best the reasonable guarantee of production to ensure the benefit and to avoid the risk. And also the lender also have to update the situation to make some model and to fit with the new situation and to cooperate good cooperation with the investor. That's something I share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tuan. And I guess the PDP number is gonna be an issue around. There's some rumor that it would be an issue around middle of this year, right?
Yeah.
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 So yeah, sure, we're looking forward to that. Yes.
Yeah. I hope that we hope that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned quite comprehensive, not only about the status of PDP8, but also the solution that and the things that investors should take into account in order to deal with the new situation. And I guess that would be my second question to Clotilde as well, regarding but more specific for rooftop project that your Shire Oak is working on, right? So as we know, for rooftop solar, there will be another FEED for it, and based on a recent draft, the FEED is lower than the FEED 2, right? It ranged from 5.89 cent to 6.84 cent, depending on the capacity of the system. And there's also some requirement in terms of at least 20% of the power generated need to be used for self-consumption, and some higher requirement in terms of the efficiency of the panel. So with all of that, how do you think what are the changes on the market for rooftop solar that we expect to see given the new policy for rooftop that I just mentioned?
Thank you for your question. So yeah, it's basically a decrease in the feed-in tariff of 30% comparing to last year. Well, that's what we expect, because we don't know for sure what it's going to be, but this is the expected the feed-in tariff that we are waiting. It's basically we're gonna have to focus on self-consumption. The idea is to build a rooftop for the electricity to be used by the factory. Anything that was done last year, and that was a really trendy market, anything building solar for the sole purpose to sell everything back to the grid, to sell 100% back to EVN, and just paying the factory for the usage of their roof, just renting their roof, basically, that's not viable anymore. That's just not going to happen. So that obviously changes the contract completely. We are moving from a kind of roof rental agreement into a PPA, where we're going to be selling the electricity to private off-takers, to commercial and industrial companies. A lot of companies were already doing that. For us, Shire Oak, private, both international company and international investors, investors were not extremely keen on projects that were selling 100% to EVN. We always saw off-takers are a bit more credit-worthy and less risky people to work with and to sign long-term contract with. So in that sense, for that hasn't changed much. We were already doing PPA, and I think a lot of companies were already doing PPA, but people were installing on the maximum space of the roof before. That's not going to be a possibility anymore. The system is going to have to match the client, the factory's needs, which I think is a good thing for EVN. We're going to avoid curtailment. That's exactly what EVN is trying to do, and I think that makes a lot of sense. We're going to do rooftop only for the factory and for what's needed. The feed-in tariff are going to be there basically for, you know, Sundays when factories are not working. So yeah, that obviously changed completely the load on the grid. It's a lot easier. The other thing that's going to change, obviously, it's the kind of client that we can work with, because we're going to have to work with only industry that have a strong need of power. So there's a lot of factories, there's a lot of industries that if they didn't do rooftop in Vietnam in 2020, they probably won't be doing it. Logistics, it's probably a little too late with the feed-in tariff that we are expecting. That probably doesn't make much sense, or it will only for a very small system that is going to be generating only the electricity that they need, and logistics have a very low power consumption. I think the very big shift that we are going to see in the industry, and we're already seeing it, is obviously a modification in investors, because private investors really like working with international companies, with private off-takers that they consider credit-worthy. Local bank and local investors last year were very keen on working with EVN for the exact same reason, because local bank see EVN as a very good stakeholder to sign a 20 years contract with. Our investors were seeing it a little bit differently. So it's a matter of point of view, but I think the result is we're going to have a lot more private investors coming into the market now to work with 100% self-consumption project, and we're going to have a bit less project funded by local investors and by local banks. And that's going to change, I think, obviously, the way that projects are evaluated, because last year, if you were to sell the electricity to the factory or to EVN, it didn't really matter. So it didn't matter if the electricity consumption of the company you were working with was stable. It didn't matter if they used a lot of power. It didn't matter if they would change their production capability. Suddenly, you know, having much less production, therefore less power consumption, because you would just sell it to EVN. That's not going to be the case anymore. So we expect that the due diligence process to work with those international companies is going to be a lot more thorough. But I think at the end, this is really good for EVN, as I said before, because it's going to take the loads off the grid. But I think it's also a really good thing for international companies, for clients, because having a more thorough due diligence process, having projects that are a lot more looked into before investing, mean that, you know, the projects are going to be more performing. The private investors are going to be focusing on the performance of projects. They're going to make sure that the O&M is done carefully, that the construction are well done. So I think this is a really good thing for every stakeholder in this industry. Maybe a little bit less for the developers, making our job a little more complicated, but it's part of the game, and it's still a very attractive market. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, definitely, given the lower feed and, you know, definitely self-consumption would be the way to go, and it leads to the need to do a careful due diligence on the potential customers. Yeah, and thank you, Kotil, for your sharing. And I would like to move to solar auction program, and I have a question to Mr. Tuấn, right? So we know that, you know, for auction, solar auction program, basically MOIT will have a list of projects put up for auction, and the project will be awarded to the bidder who offer the most competitive price to EVN, right? Mr. Tuấn, what do you think the key element that the solar auction regulation should address to make sure that, you know, this program can be successful?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Liu. In terms of the auctioning program for solar in the future, firstly, I think that now Ministry of Industry and Trade now prepare the circular to regulate about this mechanism. And other times, it's still in discussion round and not go to outside to get the opinion of contribution. But as far as I know that there are something, one option, like the first, there's no new regulation, strong regulation, and almost the operate this mechanism will follow the currently legislation requirement, the regulation, like the law of the bidding law and investment law, and some the related degree about the power plant, in national power plant, and the national and local of the planning for the land use and the resource, energy resource using of the local. And the responsibility for this auctioning is belonging to the provincial authority. It's not a MOIT function. It's the power. Sorry, the people committee will make the list of the project according to the PDP, national PDP, and the province, the planning, and annual the provincial committee send the letter to send the list of the project to the MOIT to get the opinion, and also send to the EVN to aggregate the list before the implementation. And I think that's the plan of the select the investor, select the project, or the investor for project might be have some issue, like the information about the project, like the name, location, size, and roughly in the total investment needs. Second is the option, how is it connect to the grid with the project, and including the information about the name or location of the transmission substation, and power line, like 220 kV, 1110 kV, and timing. So I think that's some key feature to make the succeed the auctioning program is the first provincial authority to organize and prepare the auctioning plan. Yeah, that's better than in the MOIT, because it's engaged with the reality of the condition of every province and the city, and the auctioning plans so suitable with the size and timing of the national province as national planning, power planning, and also suitable with the planning of the land use of the province, because this is very important. It needs consume more land. And also, the auctioning plan is have to associate with the short term and medium term of the MOIT, because you know that after PDP was approved, MOIT have to prepare the 1 year or 5 years the plan for every type of the power project, including the solar. The next important thing is the processing of the auctioning have to the public and transparency. And one more thing is the area of the project already have available the grids of enough capability to transmit, and also are in the under the upgrading to ensure the power transmission to avoid the congestion. That's, I think, my opinion about this auction. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, yeah, for auction, transparency must be the key issue, right? In order to get the confidence from the bidders. And obviously, when the bidder have to offer the competitive price, then in compensation for that, definitely they would need a smoother process for land clearance. They need to be more certain about the grid capacity to absorb the power that they generated. Yeah, so thank you for your sharing. And I think the next question I have is for Andrew. As you see, right, in the coming time, developers in Vietnam will have to keep the cost very low to make the price competitive. So how do you think the role of technology in helping developers to achieve those purposes? For example, the use of the single axis tracker system that you mentioned. Do you think that can help the developer to keep the cost low and improve the profit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Lee. So I'll use an example from our work in the Indian market. So, we've seen traditionally, and I think most people on this webinar will agree, markets that transition from FITs to competitive auctions place more competitive pressure on the developers and IPPs and respondents. So, as India's gone into that competitive auction, and I forget how many simultaneous gigawatts there were at the end of last year, but one of the auctions in Gujarat, I think it was Semcorp, I think it was Semcorp, the IPP that put in the lowest bid down to $27 per megawatt hour. And up to that point, frankly, we'd struggled for traction really with trackers in that market because it was so capex sensitive. And then all of a sudden that super low bid pricing went in, and we were just hit by a wave of inquiries and interest from pretty much all of the main IPPs in India, inquiring about trackers, because they were saying, well, to get anywhere near that bid pricing, we're going to need to step outside of our comfort zone, which is conventional fixed tilt, and explore new technology offerings to get near that pricing and hopefully still make some money. So, you know, we're in a market as capex sensitive as India. We're now expecting to get our first tracker projects away very shortly. You know, some of the value proposition changes a little bit from high direct resource regions like Gujarat to Vietnam, where, you know, it's a bit more tropical and a bit cloudier and so forth, a bit closer to the equator. You know, in the south of Vietnam, we're seeing a pickup in energy with tracking and bifacial of about 18% more kilowatt hours per kilowatt peak compared to fixed tilt. That might be a couple of percentage points lower the further north you get, and you know, the market might start moving further north because of congestion and grid constraints and so forth. But you know, we've got some interesting functionality. We use an intelligent controller with our trackers called SuperTrack that uses machine learning. It puts the bifacial modules automatically flat in times of heavy cloud cover, and it maximizes that pickup of the diffuse and scattered irradiance that's coming through and hitting the clouds and scattering in every direction. So you know, we can use intelligent functionality that is possible with trackers that isn't possible with fixed tilt to mitigate and ameliorate, you know, potential drop off when you get further north or in regions where there's heavy cloud cover. You know, some of the other benefits, as I say, we've specifically engineered our tracker structures to accommodate these larger modules and in longer strings of up to 40 modules in a string. That gives us a better tracker utilization and amortizes the relative cost of the steelwork much more effectively. Basically, fewer motors per megawatt are required, and that provides some considerable incremental cost reductions. From the extensive wind tunnel testing we've done, we've spent longer doing that than pretty much anyone else. So we've had longer to value engineer and reduce the number of foundations and piles per megawatt. We've also got special spherical bearings that, as I say, enable us to deploy the trackers on sites with incredibly variable terrain. And you know, when you're having to use fewer piles, and you can deploy the trackers on sites that have you know, a greater propensity for variable terrain, it mitigates the two key construction risks, which is geotech and topography. So it lowers the cost and it helps the EPCs sleep a bit easier at night, and hopefully that bears out in their pricing for installation. If they're a bit more comfortable, there'll be less contingencies baked into the pricing and so forth. And then with the Trina modules being low voltage, as I say, when we're running to these strings of up to 40 compared to 30 modules with competitor modules, you know, there's less DC trenching, there's fewer combiner boxes and so forth. So you overlay all of these capex savings, that can stack up to about 3 to 4 US cents per watt in high labor cost markets. That maybe reduces somewhat to lower labor cost markets to in the order of 2 to 3 cents, but it's still a big number, right? So, you know, potentially with tracking, we can reach a lower turnkey installed capex, and as the slider showed earlier, you know, in the same area with a lower DC to AC ratio, we can deliver the same or more energy for ultimately a lower absolute capex as well. I think, you know, one of the common barriers or objections we get with tracking is, yeah, but you need to use more land, right? And, you know, we quoted 0.5 gigawatt for the LSS4 program recently in Malaysia. And we found that even with quite an exorbitant cost of land in Peninsular Malaysia, where, you know, there's not much land, we were still achieving 3 to 5% lower LCOE by, you know, compressing the row spacing of the trackers to a quite a tight GCR of 0.5, and using less land, but we were still able to achieve a lower levelized cost by taking that approach. So yeah, I think you know, we see quite a bright future for tracking in Vietnam, and it's accordingly it's now one of our focus markets in Asia after or aside Australia and India.
Thank you for your sharing, Andrew. I think conscious of time, I think I have a last question to Mr. Trần regarding the DPPA program, right? So for direct power purchase agreement, we also have a draft released by the MOIG, which allowed a consumer to purchase power directly from the power plant, whether wind farm or solar farm, through the grid of EVN. The thing is that the regulation is provide for pilot program only, and the total capacity for this pilot program is capped at 1 gigawatt. While on the market, we can see that the demand is much higher. Then, Mr. Tuan, how do you think about this 1 gigawatt limit, and is there any way that the government can accommodate the demand from all the stakeholders on the market?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu, I think that the sign of the pilot program you mentioned about, and I think that so far the final decisions are not issued, but I think that's the sign of the DPPA, the pilot program around 1 gigawatt. I think that's reasonable. In the first one is, I think that's within the next 2-3 years, the PV power market just around 2,000, because you know that for the 10 years at the maximum, the sign of the government, according to the draft of the PDP8, just a maximum around 4 or 5 gigawatt. I think that's the scale of the pilot program. The 1 gigawatt is the suitable. Second thing is however, that's the pilot program implement the effect for 3 years, but in the draft of the decision, there are one issue that's every 1 year after the take some experience from the DPPA, MOIT will make some amendment, some revision. I think that's the scale of the market of the DPPA may be increased after the 1 year of the implementing. The third one is, however, the wholesale market, power markets now in the midway is not complete. So the wholesale markets will complete by 2024. And I think that on the midway, the pilot program should be the scale of the association with the wholesale market, because they need more infrastructure and more the system adapt to follow. And I think that this time the investor or also the buyer, the customer also learn more about the experience in terms of the PPA to get a more motion to participate in the DPPA market. That's my share opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, of course, it's only a pilot program, so we expect that it will continue. Yeah, I think again, conscious of time, I think I would like to turn it over to Shihan to see if we can start a Q&A question now, or should we respond to those questions after the webinar?
It seems like there's quite a lot of questions, and we went a little bit over time, but we have already kept down all the questions, and we will forward the questions to the speakers after the webinar, and you can respond by word. And then I would like to conclude this webinar. Thank you everyone again for this great panel discussion. Thank you, Ms. Claudia, Mr. Andrew, Mr. Tuan, and Mr. Liu for moderating this panel discussion. And in the meantime, let's now move to the moderator. Let's move to the lottery session. Okay, so the gift cards winner for today's webinar are Li Wing from Comtech Group, Hong Jiang Mai from Yusen Logistics, Mai Donghui from Samsung CNT Corp, Hai Wing from BIM Group, Lon from Sumo Solutions Vietnam, Dat Du Dong from Nippon Steel Engineering, Bing Tran from IMM Group, Kent Wong from VCI Legal, Rose Lee from Indochina Energy Partners, and Michael from ACCV. Congratulations to the winners. And thanks everyone again for joining today's webinar. And we appreciate our speakers' great support and valuable comments for this market. So if you have any other questions that were not answered during the webinar, please also do feel free to send your questions to the email address listing on the slides right now. I will also sum up the questions to our speakers. And also we will share the recording and relevant documents to all of you for today's webinar to your registration email by the end of next week. And thanks everyone again for attending today's webinar. We will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.